the reason that I have makeup artists and blah, blah, blah. Not that it's anything to do with my ego. But, you know.
Well, I was actually found on the way over that I was really nervous.
Really?
Yeah, and not because seeing you two is so fabulous, but just, I don't know, just...
Have you ever done anything like this before?
Not in the setup. Yes, I've been on podcasts before.
But you're a therapist.
Yes.
So you talk to people one-on-one all the time.
Yes.
But you're not normally sat in the other seat.
Not now.
Not that this is therapy, but...
Not now.
You know.
I mean, obviously I have been because I've had my own therapy.
Sure.
And quite a lot of it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bit of what this is. Maybe that's a little bit of the nerves. It's just that feeling of being sat against someone and just talking.
Welcome to Characters, a show where, in the dawn of AI, we are trying to better understand the human condition. Season 3 is all about our true colours, stripping away the grey and revealing what haunts, excites us and drives our purpose. I'm Jack, and as your host, I aim to provide our guests with a safe space, aware of potential judgment, to promote vulnerability, empathy and humility. On this show, we aren't focused on who our guest is, what they've achieved or their opinion on society. We've included links in the description for that. We're instead interested in how they overcome anxiety, deal with envy, or embrace forgiveness and gratitude. I really hope you can gain and grow from what our guest has taken a leap and shared for our benefit. And an ex-student.
Yeah, now that bit I like. I love that because as we were talking about with Ben, teaching and being with young people was just at the centre of everything that I am. So actually this feels a bit like coming home, and I've missed that a lot, although I'm obviously dealing with young people all the time. It's in a different frame. Different frame. So,
well, marvellous. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And a nice cup of tea, thank you.
And a nice cup of tea. Can't go wrong. We'll dive right in with some great questions. Let me take my phone out of here and put it on there. How have you sabotaged your own success?
In so many ways. I have real beliefs that I now really understand, that I know have held me back, not consciously, but have sabotaged my success all the way through. Well, there's one core one that is that money is dangerous and that I shouldn't have it, and if I have it, I need to give it away to other people. But that's the one that I've always known and been aware of, but it's only in the last few years that I've really come to recognise that my real saboteurs are the belief that I'm invisible, that has played out, I now recognise literally throughout my whole life, so many episodes of being invisible, that that however hard I try, I will always fail. And that's also played out. And that I'm not good enough to be believed. And those three things have really, particularly the I will always fail and being invisible, have held me back in so many ways. And I now can really understand that. So when I really want to make something work, or have done in the past, and I've really had a goal to achieve something for me, I think there's an underlying fear that is so strong that if I work really hard towards it, I'm going to fail. When I was a teacher, I now really recognise what I was doing really strongly was creating opportunities for young people to come out of the shadows and know who they were fundamentally, but also to come out of the shadows and be seen by others, because so many kids just aren't, they just don't exist. I didn't recognise then that was because of my own invisibility. But it's really impacted me because I've discovered that I can create anything and make anything happen for other people, particularly if they're young people. And I've done things that are totally out of my knowledge, my experience, my training, my anything. I've just woken up with an idea and thought, I'm going to do that because I think that will be an amazing opportunity.
it sounds like those ideas through these barriers that you had have been repressed, but have always been there. So you had a turning point, and now you have access to these. Tell me about it.
What, the turning point?
Well, tell me about. I mean, obviously, you say you had these subconscious things, these barriers that you weren't aware of, but now you obviously are.
Yeah.
So tell me about before, and then we can talk about now.
Okay. I think the thing before was that, I had an incredibly loving family. In fact, so much so, and Christmases were so special that when I talked about it at university, people used to ask if they could buy tickets to come and share Christmas and be part of my family. But despite that, there was a lot of trauma when I was a child, and that had the impact that led to these beliefs that have really held me back. So my mum, when she was pregnant with me, was told that she had acquired an autoimmune disease that meant that she was going to become quadriplegic. So she was going to become paralysed from the neck down, and that it was terminal. So she's 16 weeks pregnant with me. She's got 2 toddlers, and she's told that she has a life-limiting illness, which must have been absolutely devastating. And that's exactly what happened. So I was born, and I think she was quadriplegic probably by the time I was 2, and she died when I was 7. And that whole period of time was trying to be a voice for somebody who had no voice because she couldn't speak, because the paralysis had got her muscles. So I became a storyteller really early on, bringing the outside world to her bed, where she was in the sitting room. But it was at a time when there was no therapy, there was no talking, there was nothing. And actually, when she died, it was a case of we all knew it was going to happen. It was too distressing for other family members, for my dad to talk about her. And so we just didn't. So there was no one to share anything about how it felt for that loss. And even to this day, I can get caught and be really emotional about it, even after a million years of her not being here. But it still has that impact. And not having any forum to share anything, I just buried everything. I remember absolutely not crying when I was told, but crying in my bed every night for weeks and weeks and weeks, but never in front of other people. And then when I went to secondary school, the grief was still there, and I felt abandoned. Not in my head, in my body, in my inner child me, I felt I'd failed. That's where my belief about however hard I try, because I now recognise that when I was a child, I believed that I was there to kind of save her. I used to think that I had a belief that if I was the goodest girl I could ever be and do everything I could for her, she would get better. I now recognise that that isn't it at all. What the actual belief was is if I'm the goodest girl I can ever be, when she dies, which we're all told is inevitable, she'll take me with her. And of course she couldn't, because you can't do that. But as a 7-year-old, I didn't understand that. I just knew that I'd been left behind, and that was really torturous. And then my brother and sister were sent to boarding school, so they left as well. And my dad was working 12 hours a day in London, so he wasn't there either. And we had an amazing nanny who we'd had for a long time, who'd helped all of us and held the glue, who eventually became my stepmom. And she did an amazing job. But it was me and her, but everybody else had gone. And I think, and deep down, I just had that belief I tried so hard to be the goodest girl ever. And she died and left me behind. And that loss led to real loneliness and a sense that I just would fail. Then when I was at school and I got to A-levels, I was like #1 English student, and it was just guaranteed I was going to get an A and hope to get an A in art. And I did zoology as well. And I worked my socks off for that A, and I got a D. And it was like, here we go. It's happened again. I've tried so hard and I've failed. And that's been, and I didn't recognise it that then, but looking back, I can see how many times that's happened in my life. And the invisibility thing came from obviously nobody really understanding the level of pain you have when you've got a parent that is terminally ill, and then that loss at a time when, dinosaurs were on the earth, pretty much, and no one asked about it. And I wrote about loneliness and abandonment and grief in all of my secondary school creative writing essays. And I got A star, amazing writing. You write with such heart, with such detail. And yet not one person thought to take me aside and go, actually, Tana, are you okay? And that's, I think, really where the invisibility belief embedded is nobody seeing what this feels like? Is nobody actually going to ask me? Because I can't volunteer how it feels because there's no forum for it. And so you just buried it and just kept burying it. So that's kind of where a lot of this started.
So that's your now version of the before.
Okay.
What's your then version of the before, if you like, before you understood why? Because obviously you've dug it all out and you've looked at it again. But can we explore what it was actually like? Obviously there's the profound loneliness, but what did you think was going on?
It's a really good question and a very challenging one. I actually, looking really back into it, I believed that my job was to look after everybody else. It's like I was born to do that. So it was looking after mum and doing everything I could. But it was also looking after our nanny and then our stepmum to make sure that she was happy in the family and she was, welcomed and everything else. It was making sure my dad was okay because he'd lost mum and we knew that was a trauma for him. Then my brother and sister had their own response, obviously, to her dying and to being sent to boarding school. So it was trying to smooth how they felt. So I think there was a huge responsibility as the youngest member of the family at the time to be the responsible person to care for everybody. Yeah. And to always be as cheerful as possible and to be as caring and kind. But I found it very difficult if friends came to the house to play. I felt really awkward. I didn't know what to do with them because ours was a silent house. But I would absolutely leap at any opportunity to go to someone else's house and spend time with them and be creative. And I was always doing theatres and plays and dancing but it just was an awkward experience. We had the most loving family, but I never felt able to function properly if people came to see me, if my friends came to me. It was about me going elsewhere. And a lot of my release, I think, came from when I found a real interest in dance from a very young age, but also in drama. And I was invited into a theatre group, the West Kent Youth Theatre, when I was about 13. Everybody else was much, much older than me. And that's kind of place where I tried to find my tribe. But again, I didn't have the confidence in me. So as I always was, I found that although I had lots of friends in all my environments, primary school, secondary school, the theatre, the group, I was always on the outside looking in. I was never at the heart of it because I just didn't feel I belonged. So it was, in many ways, I was, and I use this a lot with my clients now, the real recognition that I felt lonely in the crowd all the way through my childhood and all the way through secondary school.
So where has this led you?
This led to me falling into my career as a teacher at the age of 29, when I'd fiddle-faddled out in the city. And I loved the buzz of being in the city, but absolutely had no intention of working in finance and banking and everything. And it just, I was offered a job and I was so shocked that I was offered a job that someone actually really wanted me to work with them that I took it. Fell into teaching by chance and knew that I'd come home. It felt so right. And very quickly became a house mistress. And that felt even more right because that was family. and we literally opened the doors to everybody. And we'd have major family events. And really, when I was growing up, the times when I was truly happy were times of celebration. So Christmas is the pinnacle of my life. Birthdays, Halloween, and bonfire night, and Easter, because that's when everybody was home. That was gathering. That was people around the table, people having fun and really laughing. And we laughed as a family when we were all together.
And no silence.
And no silence. And that's really the thing that you've picked up. Very interesting you said that, because I love silence for myself. I love to be on my own, especially in woods and by water and things. But if there's silence between people, I have to jump in and fill the space, because my whole childhood was in silence, because there was never any comeback from mum. It was just me talking. So, yeah, that's interesting that you've mentioned that. Silence is awkward. So don't just sit there and
Don't just sit there and smile.
Don't do it, you horrible person. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, and then you fall into this again, having to fill the silence all the time, and the people pleasing, and the do you really like me, or are you just using me, and all of those kind of questions, and horrendous. But so you did the teaching, and now where are you?
So I taught for 25 years and was happiest I've ever been. That all came to an end in 2013 because I had a breakdown that was catastrophic and totally unexpected. If I look back, the signs were there, but none of us saw it. My family and I just weren't expecting it. And that came on the back of having discovered I had a 10-inch tumour in 2012. Had to have surgery for that. Had a hysterectomy. Was a week in hospital. Was released on the opening ceremony of the Olympics. They said, you need to be at home to watch this with your family. Thank you very much. That was good. 2-3 weeks later, after that major surgery, I was running a boarding camp at school for 85 8 to 13-year-olds, which I had started years earlier. And
didn't keep you away.
Nope, not at all. And I did try and stand back, but I was in a lot of pain all the way through. And on the last night, or last afternoon, my surgeon phoned and said, what are you doing right now? I said, I'm literally about to go in and do a farewell and awards ceremony to 150 kids and parents. And she said, no, you're not. You need to hand that job to someone else. Pick up your bag, get your nice husband to drive you to London. We've kept open operating theatres and we need to have you in for surgery. I was like, really? And she said, no, really. And it transpired that I had a twisted ovarian cyst, which is why I had this sensation of having caustic acid just poured through me all the time. So I was in surgery the next day.
Jesus.
And I think it was 3 weeks after that was the start of term. And my first day back, because I hadn't had enough time to prepare, the boarding house was 20 hours on my feet. And I crumbled because I didn't have the physical strength to hold back lots of emotions that I had buried for years and a lifetime. And one of them being anger. I've always maintained I don't do anger. Everybody else does anger, but I don't, and I mustn't. But anger had been coming to the surface.
Because there's a lot to be angry about.
There's a lot to be angry about. And there's a lot of other things that have happened in my life to be very angry about as well.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. And so, it was like so alien to feel this anger. So beautifully, none of the girls in the boarding house would leave me alone because they wanted to check all the time, was I okay? And I was just getting worse and worse. And school said, right, you need to go away to get away completely for 2 weeks. And weirdly, totally unlike me, I booked a flight to Thailand and went to Thailand for 2 weeks, where I spent time with tigers and elephants. And I had therapy for 3 hours every day with an English psychotherapist who was out there. And it was incredible. And I came back and thought, I'm done. I'm healed. And then I was doing like 106-hour weeks, and the anger just came and came, and I managed to hold it off for 6 months until February the 19th, 2013. And I knew that I wasn't in a good state for teaching. And so I took myself to a really early yoga class, came out of that just as angry as I had been when I went in. And as I was driving back on a dual carriageway, an ambulance coming in the opposite direction suddenly turned on its sirens and its lights and just shut off past me. And it was literally as if somebody had pressed the switch. And I just put my foot on the accelerator. And I'm on an amazingly empty road on a Friday at 7 o'clock in the morning, looking for a tree at the side of the road. Not at all with the intention of taking my life. It wasn't about suicide. I've never been suicidal, far from it. I actually genuinely love my life. But at that moment, the voice in my head said, if you are injured so badly that you're in intensive care, then they will understand the damage they've done. And they could be a number of people and collectives. Right back to the teachers not asking me if I was okay. And the last thing I saw was a tree trunk literally here. And I went through the whole sensation of crashing headlong into it. I had the sensation, all in slow motion, of hitting the airbag and the steering wheel, of my legs being crushed, and then this blanket coming over me and just waiting to hear the sirens coming to rescue me, not everybody rescuing everybody else. When I came to, none of that had happened. How I didn't connect with the tree, because it literally was in the middle of my windscreen, I've never known. But I came to and discovered that I was about 200 metres down the road, having clearly spun several times. Hadn't touched the central reservation, hadn't touched anything, physically completely unharmed, and emotionally utterly broken. Wow. Absolutely hysterical. And it was as much as I could do to turn the car around and kind of limp it back to school. And drag myself in to see the medical centre, where normally I was the one who was always bouncing in with all the pupils and just, and I couldn't speak at all. And I remember the nurse going, oh my God, and going immediately, and the doctor coming in and them just looking in absolute horror at this mess that was before them. So we talked and everything, and they said, look, we'd like to get you an appointment with a psychiatrist. And I had a couple of appointments with a London psychiatrist, and I went, okay, fine. Pulled myself together, went home, said hi to the family, said, I've had a bit of a wobble. I'm going to talk to a psychiatrist this afternoon. Had a chat with her, and she said, Tana, we'd really like you to come into hospital in London just for 3 days for assessment. And when it came to going, my husband said, look, I'll drive you into London. I said, well, no, I can go on the train. It's not a problem. You need to go teach, you need to go to school, you need to go to work. Everything's fine. I'm perfectly capable of getting myself into London. Took my little suitcase, went to Marylebone and went to the hospital near Marylebone Station. And I remember only as I started walking up to it, getting really nervous and thinking, is this like the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Am I walking into a place of cells and metal bars and people banging their heads and people screaming? And I can feel it now, actually. It was a genuine fear. And interestingly, I discovered how many other people had the same thoughts. I arrived at this massive oak door and rang the bell and walked into what I thought was going to be a horror scene and found myself in a very luxurious mental health hospital. Totally hadn't prepared myself for that. Hadn't even thought about the fact that it was a private hospital, that was because I had insurance. Lush carpets, beautiful pictures, and not only a room of my own, but an ensuite with a view, loo with a view down to Marylebone. And the whole drama of what happened then, of one of the nurses coming in and saying, I'll unpack your little suitcase. And I'm going, no, it's all right, I'll do it. It'll take me 2 minutes. No, I'll unpack it for you. And then watching her pulling out my phone charger and then the laptop lead and then my dressing gown cord and then my razor, and going, oh my God, the realisation that they genuinely thought I was at risk of suicide never occurred. And I went, oh my God, it's not me. And she said, you can have these, you can come and ask for them, you can have them back when you need it. And that was a real shock. Anyway, very long story short,
the
3 days that I was promised for assessment actually turned into a 6-month stay. I was released at, not that I say released, it sounds like I was being held there. I wasn't. I was allowed to go home about 10 weeks into my time there. But I had to come in 6 days a week as a day patient. And about the second week, I had a catastrophic episode again and went into a state of what's called catatonic dystonia, which is when you become completely paralysed in whatever position you're in at the time. And I was stuck, like, I had a pill in one hand and a cup of water here, and the ellipse of the water was here. My head turned to the left, and I was sat on a sofa, cross-legged, and I just froze in this position. And I couldn't speak. I found it very hard to swallow. I could only make noises. I knew they were very busy bringing in new patients, and I could hear people running up and down the corridors. And then that abated, and I could hear people laughing, and nobody knew. Invisible. Anyway, what happened was I was readmitted. And it was the most extraordinary experience of my life. I would never have chosen to have experienced all the things that led to me ending up there. I would never have chosen to miss my daughter's 18th on her last terms at school and to just disappear from the family. And my husband to this day still actually can't get over the trauma of me just never coming home. But I wouldn't have missed it for the world, because it has absolutely shown me what I need, what I'm supposed to be doing. And it set me on a mission to find a solution to the global mental health crisis, which sounds incredibly grandiose, but actually it is absolutely where my heart is. That I think there is a solution. I know there is a solution. It's now, and I've done 10 years of research and trialing and testing and investigating and talking to find what that is. And now I think I know. And so the rest of my life will be dedicated to doing what I can to help people to understand what we need to do. And it's not about medication and therapy. It's about prevention. And it's all about changing the way we interact with, speak to, respond emotionally to children from the minute they're conceived, not just from birth, but from conception onwards. Whoever we are, whether we're shopkeepers and bus drivers or teachers, parents, carers, anybody who has any interaction with kids, other kids. It's what happens to us. It's what we overhear. It's what's said to us. It's every event that we ever experience that creates an emotional response in us that lays the foundations for whether we survive and thrive or crash and burn. And if we were more aware of that, if I'd known when I was teaching what I know now, I think I did a pretty good job intuitively, but I would have understood so much more and would have changed my teaching. And there's so much more we could be teaching in primary school to help children understand the power of their minds to achieve and to step out of the fear of failure and the I can't do maths, I can't have friends, I'll never be good enough to meet my parents' expectations, I'll never be in the football team, I'll never.
It's all compounding, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all compounding.
So that was all where it led. So how can you regret or wish it hadn't happened? And I remember every single detail of what happened in those 6 months. And the psychiatrists and things just are dumbfounded by that because I was so ill. But it was an extraordinary opportunity. It was a gift. It was really a gift.
I see you have a monkey by your side.
I do.
So this is obviously where you are now. So tell me about where you are now and what you're doing and what you've done.
Why I've brought this character with me. This is Bert. And the idea to bring him literally just arrived today. And I suddenly thought, and I'm going to put him on my shoulder, because my understanding now is that each of us has an inner monkey that is born with us. Is from the minute we're conceived, they come along with us, and they're all different. And our monkey's role in our lives is essentially to keep us safe. And through all these years of research, and I've been working as a therapist and a mindset transformation coach for the last 10 years, and I work with children from 4 to those in their 20s. And I've been working with hundreds extensively in schools, through local services, privately. And it's become clearer and clearer the impact of having a monkey on our shoulder, which is effectively the metaphor for the fact that we have this deep subconscious inner demon that manages to note everything that we do. And the examples I've just given you about what people say and how they say and our emotional response. And I just started formulating this way of expressing to children and teenagers why so many have mental health problems. 50% of all adult mental health illness is already embedded by the age of 14. So what's happening in the first 14 years of life? 75% by the age of 24. What's happening in our childhoods? That means that the vast proportion of our mental health issues are already embedded. So I embarked on a journey to talk to hundreds of people. I started that in hospital, talking to all the other patients. And then some had massive trauma that you could understand would lead to mental health problems, but others didn't. They were just ordinary people like me. And so what was it that happened? And it always went back to childhood, and even just to being called fat all the way through primary school, or thicko, or nerd, or whatever it might be, or parents saying, you got 97%, what happened to the other 3? Rather than celebrating the 97. So I started exploring that and just kind of intuitively developed this whole way of working with what I call monkey wisdom. So the monkey is core to everything. And the way I explained it seemed to really resonate with people. They started to get it. And so basically, if it's okay to share it with you, it's just, I see everybody as a tapestry. So I see you as the outline of who you are, but you are filled with thousands of threads like stitches. And when I stand far enough back, I can see the person that you are as a whole. Our monkeys have a bag of crayons. And from the minute we're conceived, the monkey will colour one of your threads every time you have an emotional response to anything, which is pretty much every minute of the day, he will colour a thread according to how that event has made you feel, or that comment, or that experience, or overheard conversation. We have an emotional response. The monkey will colour a thread. So if you imagine you're a child in a very happy family, but a very busy family, you're a baby and you're left to cry a lot. How would the monkey feel? That's what I say to children. How would he feel if they can hear the family next door, but they're crying and nobody's coming? Lost, not loved, not important. What colour is that? It's different for everybody, but it's very often blue. And that happens quite a lot. So there's a few blue threads coloured. And then that child goes to nursery and comes running out of nursery all excited with their picture to show whoever's picking them up. And more often than not, that person says, oh, hang on a minute, sweetie, I've just got to finish this work text, or I've just got to finish this conversation, or talking to so-and-so's mummy. How does that make them feel?
Invisible.
Invisible. That's blue again. So these are not things that child is ever going to remember as an adult, but the monkey has made a mark. And every time the monkey sees that child being ignored or invisible or left in the cold, he will mark it. And if you get a big enough patch of one colour, that becomes a limiting belief. And my patches were so many moments of being invisible, of not having my pain seen, that it became a limiting belief, which is that I am invisible, fundamentally. And then what the monkey does for the rest of your life is point out all the evidence to prove that that's true. So children that are bullied at primary school, the monkey may make them shut down and, bring their hair across their faces and make them retreat and try and be invisible so that they don't attract the attention of bullies at secondary school. Or the monkey might decide, okay, I'm going to make you the bully. We'll face the world with anger. We'll be bigger and angrier and bolder than everybody else, and then no one will touch us. And so for that kind of guy or girl, the monkey will walk into the playground at the beginning of the day and go, I don't like the way he looked at you. We'll have him later. And so the whole behaviour keeps going. So we're very unaware of our monkeys, but once you become aware, you can start asking to mute the monkey. And that's really what I've developed and how I work, and it's been massively successful. But I've also done a huge amount of work on the power of our minds to change our outcomes. And when you start teaching that to primary school children, literally can see such a difference. And it's really exciting, and it's so simple. Whether you're dealing with separation anxiety or low mood, or 6, 7, 8-year-olds that I've worked with who are suicidal, if you give them the structures, they can really turn around how they feel about themselves. And when they start to do that, they start to achieve in ways that they never thought was possible. So I have just finished my 6-year-long book, There's a Monkey on Your Shoulder, hence Bert here. And although it was written for teenagers, it's actually really as much about adults. I was really hoping that parents and teachers would read it. And I've discovered that there's a whole tranches of octogenarians who are reading it and passing it on and buying it for their friends and saying it's made sense of their childhood and that it's inspirational for them. And it's touching people in a way that I'd never expected. And it's all about 8 teenagers who are gifted the opportunity for a personal development week on the north coast of Scotland. And from the outset, we can see that each of them has their monkey on their shoulder, which has their own personality. And you can hear the words the monkey puts into their heads about why they can't do this and why people won't like them and all the fears. The kids don't learn about until halfway through the book, when it's suddenly introduced to them that they have a monkey and they just think that's a load of nonsense. And then they start paying attention and realising the patterns of their thinking and seeing how they can mute the monkey and start thinking what they want to think and doing things that they never thought they could do.
It must have been quite a challenge for you to take your own ideas seriously.
Yes, that's a very good point. There's the conscious part of me was going, what are you doing? Who do you think you are to write this? But I had a really strong sense that this wasn't my story to write, that it came from somewhere else. In fact, the concept arrived on a train. I was very unusually going into London with my husband. The train was empty. It was the middle of the day, and there was a woman sitting opposite who was reading a children's book avidly. And I remember thinking an unforgivable thought that if that was my reading age, I'm not sure I'd be reading on a train, and then immediately going, how could you even, how dare you even think that? And then having a sense that she actually knew the author, she was so engaged. And as I thought that, I had this just dropping sensation, like, whoa. And I just turned to my husband and said, I've got to write a book about teenagers going on a course and they all have an inner monkey that's on their shoulder that controls their thinking. And he went, right, good on you. And I grappled with it for a year thinking, how do I make sense of this? How does this actually work? And started doing more and more research. And then about a year later, having got no further with it, I was on a very packed train going into London to an event, and I was exhausted, and I thought, I need a seat and I need to meditate or do something. Otherwise, I'm not going to survive the evening. And I got the last seat, and there's people like rammed around me, and I closed my eyes and literally had this downloading of characters and the kind of things challenges that they were given. And I got to the end and got off the train absolutely electrified. And I went to this event. It was just like, I was really on fire. But it still took me 5 years to write the rest of it, because there's a part of me that says, however hard you work, it's going to fail. I can work and work and work and do this. But what if I get to the end and everybody thinks it's rubbish and nobody wants to know it?
And that's every day.
Yeah.
It's every day. It's coming to things like this and it's standing up and talking about it, and it's every day. There he is. He's there.
Absolutely.
There. Hello.
All the time
still
saying,
here.
yeah, do you think you should? And, who do you think you are? And who's going to read it? And how do you know it works? And I've always found my whole life, when I've heard about people who are really, really successful, like they've really achieved something, whoever they are, at whatever level, I immediately shut down. It's like, Everybody else can do it, but I can't. And that's been a real monster. Thanks. All the way through writing the book was that fear. But something shifted at the beginning of this year. I had a really, really bad start to this year. And then I made a decision.
Last year.
Last year, yes. Well, last year.
Thank God it's over.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
No, literally.
No. Yeah.
That's how I felt for like 8-9 months. This is the worst year I've had for such a long time. And then something shifted, and I found myself a hotel that was open from very early in the morning, and I just loved the atmosphere there. And I went 3 days a week from 8, and I wrote until 1. And I could just engage without feeling that I should be looking after other people, that I should be coming out of my cabin and going and making sure everybody else in the world was okay. And that was the turning point. And then I started reading it and reading my book over and over again to make sure it was right, and having to cut out words. I had to cut out 35,000 words, which was heartbreaking because they were such important parts. And I started to realise how it would work. And I was going to go to try and get an agent. And then film director, who's shown a lot of interest in the potential of this book being a film, she'd read it. She said, will you just stop and publish it? This was about October. She said, will you
October 24.
October 24. She said, will you publish the book? Because I can't do anything with it until I've got it in my hands. Why don't you just do it by Christmas? And I went, okay. And 6 weeks later, it was published. Best thing I could ever have done. Best thing she could have ever said. Otherwise, it might have been another 10 years.
Because then it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can give it to people.
Yeah.
And it's not a secret, and it's, and you can't touch it anymore because
Yeah.
you've actually finished something.
I have finished something, and the best thing is the response that I'm getting from people. It's really taken me aback, but it's the first time I've ever felt I've really accomplished something, because people of all ages are giving me very individual feedback. They're getting very different responses to the book. I've had some, 14, 16-year-olds who were self-harming and remembered I'd said, if you feel like you're going to get to that point again, please just open the book. And finally, one of them did. And she said, 4 hours later, I realised I hadn't touched myself and I didn't want to anymore. And 3 days later, the book was finished. And I resonate with this, and it's shown me I'm not alone. I realise I'm not the only person who feels this way. She handed it to somebody else. He read it in 3 hours straight and said, I totally resonate with this girl. And what I love is the fact that this is so real, where so much media tries to dumb everything down. This is as it is, and I feel validated and recognised. And then our boiler broke over Christmas, and a wonderful woman in our community who I'd heard was a gas engineer, I said, can I book you in a couple of weeks? She said, no, I'll come around in 20 minutes. Didn't want to charge me for an hour and a half's work. We talked about the book, I gave her the book, and within hours, she'd read huge parts of it and said, we've had things that have happened in our life that we've never, ever talked about. It happened 5 years ago. We couldn't find the words. I now know this is going to open everything. So...
Because that is quite a lot of it, is my feeling and understanding about a lot of mental health issues, is that the person cannot put it into words.
Yeah.
They don't actually have the words to express how it feels.
Yeah.
And it feels to me that this analogy, not that I've had the chance to read it yet because I haven't got one, but it feels like that has the potential to be incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And that it's giving a voice, and it's finding the words, and people are recognising themselves in different characters and seeing that there is good in the world, and that you shouldn't, judge a book by its cover, and that people who appear to be really shit on the outside might actually be just people who are really hurting.
In pain, yeah.
And, especially for young people to realise that, to recognise that, I think it's really important.
But, I mean, anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone, from the road rage incidents to the, all of it, to, to return in kindness, not in anger and just hiding it all.
Yeah.
Because that's deflationary rather than, you
Yeah.
know, just making it all. I grew up with my parents screaming at each other.
Yeah.
You know, so that I walk down a street and I'm afraid that I'm going to upset someone.
Yeah.
I'm a people pleaser. It's that shadow, and it's a daily battle, and everybody's got their own version of something similar. You know, dependent on what was going on.
Yeah.
And for some people, it is so wrapped and tied up and locked, boxed down in the cellar of their mind that you can't go there.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's such a lot of work that needs to be done, but it can only start with the person, and you know, a very difficult job. Very difficult.
It's about giving people the courage to do that. And I think when I was a teacher, I was so struck by how many people, including myself, I didn't recognise at the time, wear a mask, put a mask on every day of normality and happiness. And of course, it's exacerbated now by social media, because that is the ultimate mask.
The ultimate.
But there were kids in the boarding house, there were pupils that I taught, kids in school who you thought had everything. You know, you knew they had really loving families, really vibrant lives. They had wonderful holidays. They had a smile on their face. Everybody loved them. But when I really talked to them, I discovered such hidden secrets and such hidden darkness and pressures in their lives that nobody knew about. Because like for me, that was normal. That's just how life was. So it wasn't any disaster. It wasn't trauma. I've never considered my mum dying as trauma until I started exploring it and realising it was serious trauma. But it was just my life. That's what happened. But to
How
realise,
could you possibly know that if nobody talks to you about it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So people who are living these lives as teenagers or whatever age of people-pleasing or being the centre and looking after everybody else and just putting on this front, just don't even realise themselves how much they're hiding. And I remember talking to a pupil once who was in a lot of trouble in one of the schools I taught, and school wanted to get rid of them, and I just knew this soul was not a bad person. No, nobody is. There's bad stuff, but they're not bad people. And I sat this person down and I said, we're not going until we really talk, like really get under the surface of what's going on. Why are you so angry with the world? And it took about 2.5 hours. We sat on desks and just puddled around conversation. And then suddenly the floodgates opened. And there was an admission that his father was so demanding of achievement, and nothing he ever did, even though he was getting in the high 90s, was ever good enough. And so he never felt he could ever achieve anything that anybody wanted.
So why not just destroy it all?
And he said that as he was growing up, through his teenage years, he heard his father's voice coming more and more out of his mouth in the way that he spoke to other people, and he hated that about himself, which made him angry. And the monkey was protecting him by then fighting the world with anger, which got him into trouble. I had a young boy who a school wanted to get rid of because he was so aggressive in the playground and all the rest of it. And when I got underneath his skin, I discovered really wonderful family, but very traumatic. He had a brother who had autism and was very, very difficult. And Dad would leave early for work, and this boy would just take the family to pieces. And this lad never felt he could say anything, because he knew if he did, none of them would make it to school and his mum might not be safe. So he suppressed everything. And then he'd get to the playground at school and just the anger would erupt and come out on everybody else. And when you understand that, you see the child in a completely different light.
Absolutely.
And the conversations we had were extraordinary. I discovered that he had such, at the age of 9, such an innate understanding of what was going on in the world, and such a compassion for the world and the animals in the environment, and a knowledge that was so beyond him. But nobody knew, because it was all hidden behind the anger, and this is a really badly behaved child. And with good reason. And that's my biggest thing, is for everybody to look into other people's eyes and really ask them how they are and find a way to help them bring out the answer.
Active listening and supportive listening and pinpointing something they said earlier so you know that they're listening.
And caring enough to really ask.
Absolutely.
And
follow up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then sort of, if the goal is to right all the wrongs of indeed, which is incredibly noble and incredibly right, logistically, obviously ginormous task. So on the face of it, it feels like, but it is all about education.
Yeah. 100%. And for me, it's about educating schools, facilities, carers, parents, as I said, anybody who has anything to do with children, to really understand the absolute impact of everything that we say and do and how we respond to kids emotionally. Because when you really understand that and you change the way you behave, children are completely different.
Absolutely.
And how they feel is different. I was working with someone the other day who came in a real state, really angry, floods of tears, has an amazing relationship with their parent, but was really angered by a reference to the parent that I think she'd been extremely rude and sworn. And the parent had said, oh, if Nanny G heard you, they'd be turning in her grave. And that was such a trigger for this girl.
Guilt.
And she said, I hear this all the time. Every time I do something wrong, I hear, well, if Nanny G was this. And she said, it's like I'm being stabbed because she was my favourite person in the world and then disappeared when I was 8 and I never saw her again. And at the age of 8, you don't really understand what death is. And missed her. And to be told that her behaviours would make that loved person turn in her grave was catastrophic for her. So I had to bring Mum in and say, do you understand? She went, I never mean anything by it. And that's the point. We don't as parents, but we say it because we think it might have an impact in some way, or we don't even think about it. But it never occurred to her that that was such a painful thing. And once that was understood, transition made.
And actually quite simple.
Yeah.
When it really comes down to it.
That's the point.
And everybody's avoiding it or not even aware of it in that case. It's a fantastic story that I have told before, but my cousin, he got himself into an engagement. He was engaged to be married, but he was incredibly unhappy in this engagement. It got to a couple of days before the week of the wedding, and he got ill. Like, he was ill. He was in hospital ill, and he didn't know why. And his dad came to visit him, and he was there, and he was saying, "What's wrong? What's going on?" And he was lying there. He said, "I don't know what's going on." And his dad said, "I know what's wrong. You don't want to get married." And he just fell to bits and fell to bits, and it was and then the wedding was called off and separated and all the rest of it. Cut to childhood. His father and mother had the perfect relationship. They grew up in that they were wonderful to each other, and everything was always wonderful, and it was always wonderful. And I think, there was a conversation, he tells it much better than I do, but the crux of it is that there was a conversation between him and his father when he was a child or a teenager, probably a child. And he said, and basically his dad said, all I want for you is to be happy. And my cousin interpreted that as, I need to be happy for Dad.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, that was it. I need to be happy for Dad. And so he was painting the pretty picture of being happy for Dad, and got himself, at the end of the day, into this relationship because mirroring his father's and mother's relationship. And again, that was just such a simple misinterpretation. And his dad didn't mean that.
Yeah.
So there's no use in blame, but there's also objectively no reason to blame his father. So again, education, which is in that instance is harmless. It's just literally an awareness of what you say can mean everything to a child, by your benchmark, under 14.
Yeah.
So I think it's incredible what you're doing, and I really hope people take notice, and I'm certainly on board. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
That's for sure. Because ever since I started therapy, and had my landmark sessions, it's been more and more a part of my life, and wanting to share the wealth, in exactly the same way, because you do come out of therapy, as most people do, I believe, saying, oh, everybody should go.
Yeah. I've trialed lots and lots of different therapies because I wanted to understand, especially if I was going to work in this field.
Sure, all the different fields. Yeah.
What works, because it's not one size fits all.
No.
But in 2016, I had a lot of therapy when I came out of hospital and so on. But in 2016, I had cancer. And I'm sure the cancer and the tumour and everything were all brought on by suppressed emotions and so on. But I had cancer and went into hospital, and I had 11 and a half hours of surgery, and I was in hospital for a week, and amazing care in NHS hospital, except for my mental health. And my medications were in a cupboard next to me, and I could not get anyone to give them to me. And I asked and I asked and I asked. Talk about feeling invisible. I asked endlessly. I need the medication, because there was one drug, which for me, if I didn't have it within just even a few hours, I would start to feel incredibly ill. And if it was a day, God help, 2 days, I literally was like, I had the worst flu, unable to function. And I was terrified of this happening. And I asked and I asked and I asked. And the whole thing was really interesting, because eventually a doctor came in and just said, what's the problem? And I went, I've been asking for 3 days for my medication and nobody will give it to me. And he went, it's being sorted, and just walked out. And I was so disbelieving. And then a pharmacist came in, and she was really gruff, and she snatched everything out and she went right over there, and she couldn't give me mine, had to do a prescription, disappeared. Somebody came back with the drugs and said, so it's 50 mils of this, and I went, no, it's not. It's 20 mils of that, it's 50 of that. And it was wrong. So I corrected him. Anyway, it was ongoing. And by the end of the week, I was so angry. And the last thing that happened, I was all packed up, ready to go home. The same pharmacist came back in and she said, you've got no drugs to take with you, you've got nothing. And I went, I feel on pain relief in here 4 times a day, and I'm just not having anything. She said, just go and buy, you just take, 1,000 of paracetamol. I said, what do you mean? She said, oh, for goodness sake. And she walked out, and the anger erupted, and I just fell apart. And my surgeon happened to walk past, and he came in, you've been the most positive person we've ever had. What's happened? I had a long conversation. That anger about that lack of awareness and treatment really hit me hard. And actually I ended up stopping in at the Macmillan thing as I walked out of the place, and fell apart completely. And they set up for me to see a psychotherapist, to be assessed. I thought I was just having psychotherapy. 3 sessions in, she said, we've assessed you, and we strongly believe that you really need help, and that you should come for 3 one-hour sessions a week for the next 2 years.
Wow.
And I thought, bloody hell, if the NHS is wanting to commit to 3 sessions a week for me, I must be really ill. And then I thought, do I want to do this? And I thought, yes, I do, because this will give me a greater insight. This will give me another education to another layer of what's going on. If I can really peel away my layers and understand every single thing about me, then I can help other people. So I did it, and it was hell from beginning to end. But it was also extraordinary, and it was another part of that learning.
And freeing, and able to just live life in a totally different way.
Yeah, but it was bloody tough. It was absolutely horrendous, because that was a totally different type of therapy where I talked to myself for an hour and was so raw and open by the end of the hour, and then just told, right, I'll see you on Tuesday. Shut down, invisible. I behaved like a child for 2 years, like really behaved like a child for 2 years. I was angry. I stomped out and slammed doors. I was rude. All the things that I never allowed myself to do came out, which I guess was part of the process.
Well, the anger needed to go somewhere, because that was probably the crux of it. I mean, you're not angry at mum, but you're angry at her for dying.
Or leaving me behind.
Indeed.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and that's nobody's fault, but you can still be angry about that.
Absolutely.
And if you've got nowhere to put that, then tumour.
Just festers. Yeah. And then it comes out in whatever way it can. But that's not going to happen again. I won't have tumours, I won't have cancer, I won't have anything else now, because I'm a completely different person. In an incredible space. I'm not on any medication. After years and years, I'm not on any medication. And I'm in the best space that I've ever been.
So what do you wish people understood about you?
About me? Interestingly, there's a part of me that I want to be seen. I want to speak on the biggest stages I can speak on. But this fella here says, yeah, but if you're doing that, that means you're attention seeking. And to me, that's one of the worst possible things I could be, is to be an attention seeker. And so that's a really big thing. That's what holds me back now.
But you need the attention to get the message out.
Exactly.
That's the point.
Exactly. So there's two real parts of me. There's the part of me that's on this mission to really get people to understand. And in order to do that, it's not by doing one-to-one, it's by speaking to as bigger audiences as I can across the board, all age groups. And then there's the monkey on my shoulder who says, yeah, but, you know, who are you to do that? And you'll be seen, and you're stepping out from a long, many, many, many years of being invisible into the spotlight, and that's a dangerous place to go. So it's a really interesting battle, but I'm absolutely ready for it. I don't think I've ever been more ready. And I think releasing the book and having the response that I've had is the turning point.
Yeah, it was that step, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, it's happening now.
Yeah, there's no stopping it now.
No, good on you. Yeah,
Actually can't wait.
Yeah, no, I mean, you clearly. And
I'm really
Just
excited.
really flourishing, I think is the word, you know.
And I want to do a one-woman show. I want to do not a performance, not a play. I want to do a storytelling, because that's what I'm best at. I want to tell what happened in those 6 months in hospital, because it is fascinating and harsh and funny and humorous and loving and such a journey. And I hope that will open up conversation for other people. And I've got an idea that's been just growing for doing an art installation that will give people the opportunity to really say in writing what it is they want to achieve, how they felt all their life, to the people dead or alive that they wish truly knew what their life had been like. And that's becoming a really big, important part of what happens next. Watch this space.
Marvellous. Absolutely wonderful. This is a wonderful question. I love this question. Do you feel you live an ordinary or an extraordinary life?
The child me would say an ordinary life, but I now can put my hand up and say, I think it's an extraordinary life. And that brings up quite a lot of emotions, but actually there's a reason that I've been through everything that I've been through. And I have a massive responsibility now to make the best use of that. And I do, it's hard to say, I could actually put my hand up for the first time and say, I think I've done something really good and really important. And I have to own that now and be brave enough to follow it through.
I mean, it sounds to me like there's nothing that you haven't done which hasn't been good and important, Tana, for what it's worth.
Yeah,
despite how it feels.
All of the things,
you, But it's wonderful that you can hold your hand up, as you say. But, I mean, from being your student, and you helped me at the time in the way that you were allowed to help me, because that was the course. But you were my teacher and had a profound impact on me in those lessons, and I've carried through that forward throughout. So to me, good and important. And you being able to hold your hand out and say that, oh, now you can finally do that. I mean, it seems like madness to me, but then, of course, it is a madness because that's the illness, right?
Yeah.
So I fully understand that. But at the same time, like, you've got another vote.
Thank you. And, I had a text out of the blue the other day, from one of my first pupils. So we're talking 30 years ago. Haven't had any connection since. Who said, I just wanted to write and let you know that I have major cancer and I've been really ill for a long time. You were always there for me as my house mistress, and I just wanted you to be there for me now. And that meant more than anything, that after 30 years or whatever, that person could want to make contact and reconnect at her time of absolute need. And I think that was another part of the turning point of realising actually I have had an influence
Profound impact.
on people.
Profound impact, as any wonderful teacher does, I think, because you're there at a point in a child's life that is profound. So you can't not be,
Yeah. And actually the characters in the book are all drawn from pupils and clients that I've worked with. They're an amalgamation of everybody's stories. They're real. They're real people. They may be taken from different people, but they're real stories. And that's been a real privilege to be knowing those stories, for people to have shared, and for me to have been able to see what I've seen. Just entertains me that the main character is called Jack.
Well, I look forward to learning about Jack. Absolutely. Tara, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. I think what you're doing is wonderful, and I can't wait to see it flourish.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. It's been great to talk, and thank you for those challenging questions.
Well, that's the idea. It's great. More of those, but you're experienced. That's fine.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for watching Characters. I hope you were able to gain and grow from our guests' vulnerability. To discover more characters, please subscribe to support the show and allow us to share more of our true colours. Here's the latest episode, or one YouTube has picked for you. Enjoy.